Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Himanshu Chawla, Regional Communication Program Manager with Friedrich Naumann Foundation South Asia. A very warm welcome to our distinguished speakers and participants. And this is a quite relevant web talk on India's demographic milestone, prospects and obstacles. We witness a historic shift as India becomes the world's most populous nation. Overtaking China, this transition opens significant economic and political prospects, from a larger domestic market to increased forest investment. However, there are challenges too, like strain on infrastructure and employment. Please join us today to dissect the multifaceted dimensions of India's population milestone and gain insight into its economic, political, and social implications for India and its neighbors. We are delighted to have you join us. Our journey of this web talk commences with a special address by an esteemed guest. We are delighted to have with us Honorable Dr. Christoph Hoffmann, an esteemed member of Free Democratic Party in German politics, and he has been a Bundestag member since 2017, and he presently chairs the Committee on Economic Cooperation and Development. He has a wealth of experience in the advisory board of the German Foundation for World Population, DSW, and we look forward to his insights that will set the stage for our discussion. Dr. Hoffmann, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction, and welcome to everybody who is joining today the Friedrich Naumann webinar. Of course, it's an important date. It's a democratic milestone when India overtakes China as the most populous country in the world. But if you look at the world itself, we now almost 8 billion people, maybe 7 something. It's not very clear. And we're heading towards 10 billion. And the world is not worse than it was before. It's better than it ever was. And we were able to feed 7-8 billion people. Sometimes there's problems with hunger, but this is usually derived from armed conflicts. So armed conflicts is one of the obstacles for the really human development. So the globalization has brought the liberty to the economies and has made possible a lot of economic growth in a lot of countries, and the age of population is growing as well. We can see that even in sub-Saharan Africa, where you have a hotspot of population growth. In a country like Niger, you have about 7 kids per woman. And so this is, of course, not a healthy development, but it has to be balanced. And if you look at India now, it's about 2 kids, whereas in China, it's 1.19 kids. So China is decreasing, whereas India is still a little growing, but is sort of being balanced out. I'm not very afraid of this development because I think we can manage this world. And as you said, there's a lot of chances in India. The reason why we have in sub-Saharan Africa a lot of population growth, it's because of low education. Women do not get any education. Women do not go to school enough. And it's poverty in the end. And they see kids as their retirement fund. India has a lot of chances now. They're leading in space industry. They have a lot of IT specialists, and but there's still a lot of things to do, like healthcare, I think, and education can always be better in every country, also in Germany. And as we see the cooperation between India and Germany, there's also some obstacles. We could have a lot more economic cooperation, which there's a lot of obstacles like visa procedures. We have seen people investing in Germany from India, but they can't get a visa. So this is ridiculous, and we have to change it on our side. And the cooperation with India can go on, will go on, and they will have better times as ever before. I'm convinced of that. We have a lot of investments from Germany going to India, and also vice versa. And this is a good development because if it's balanced, it's always healthy development. So I'm looking forward to the development of India And I think worldwide, we can still manage this population growth as we have to really focus on those countries where there is a huge population growth, like in sub-Saharan Africa. Not enough has been done there. We need more infrastructure there, more economic development, more globalization, and more liberalism, if you want so, to heal those wounds. So I think the world is looking forward, and we're looking forward to a really sound development of India. And there's a lot of cooperation going on between India and Germany at these days, and the European Union as well. So I'm very curious about this discussion, how you see things. And so I'm letting the floor now to all the other speakers. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Hoffmann. Before we transition, let us express our sincere appreciation to Dr. Hoffmann for his enlightening remarks. It has set a strong foundation for our dialogue today. Now, we move on to our keynote address of this web talk. We have the privilege to hear from Mr. Bernhard Steinrucker, who has been associated with India since 1993, first as CEO of Deutsche Bank, then as Director General of the Indo-German Chamber of Commerce, and continues to be a member of the committee of the Chamber. He was awarded the Order of Merit of the Federal Republic of Germany for his services for Indo-German relations. Over to you, Mr. Steinrucker.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's indeed my pleasure to participate here. And it's so nice to meet my old friend, Gudrun Das, who I met 30 years ago, and we share our passion for art. So we basically met through the art, and I had the privilege to see his collection, or the corporate collection, in those days, because he was a pioneer in collecting contemporary art, and I learned a lot from him when I was with Deutsche Bank. So it's fantastic to see you, Gudrun. Very nice. So looking at the demographic development of India, it is, of course, indeed remarkable, taking over China. And now the big question is, how can India reap the benefit of this remarkable development? And certainly, one requirement is skilling. That is absolutely critical. But there are many, many more requirements that India has to look at. And I'm very optimistic because one big advantage that India has is that its population is very young. And so they are young, they're ambitious, they want to learn, and they want to make a good living. And so from that angle, in India, we have the right attitude. And India also, which is quite important, has an entrepreneurial tradition. There, like in Germany, there are many, many family-owned and run companies, some of them all over the world, very active. So from that angle, I think India has it all. And it's only up to India now to reap in the benefits. On the other hand, of course, there are challenges, there's no doubt about it, because when we look at the growth of the population in India and the demographic development, then we have to realize that a lot of growth is actually happening in states like Andhra Pradesh, which on its own would be the 5th largest country in the world, or like in Bihar, and like in many of the northeastern states. And in these states, actually, the challenge is that the development is still comparatively low compared to some of the other states. So if India wants to reap in the demographic dividend, then it has to develop these states. That is absolutely critical. And of course, India also has to look at the global developments. Of course, now India is in the limelight with G20, hosting G20 in another 2 weeks' time. Actually, next week, the world leaders will come to India for the summit. And already now, India has shown with all the G20 events, and some of you have participated last week in B20, Business 20 in Delhi, how really remarkable it can organize it. And of course, it's fantastic that last week the satellite landed on the south pole of the moon, which is, of course, a remarkable achievement, absolutely outstanding. So I think India has it all, and it's up to India to now reap in the benefits. But it is, of course, also up to countries like Germany to participate in that. India is open for that. Germans are welcome, most welcome. Many of the German companies have been here for more than 100 years and are extremely successful, are some of the biggest international employers actually in India. So from that angle, it is all there, it is all possible, and we all just have to basically make it happen. Just one last remark, because now India has taken over from China as the world's most populous country. And of course, China is always somehow the elephant in the room. And people are looking at how did China do it? And can India replicate that or not? Of course, Gujran, he has his opinion to that, and we can discuss that at length. But the fact of the matter is that in 1991, when India started its liberalization, the per capita income of India and China was the same. And then both countries grew. And today, the per capita income of India is where China's was in 2007. And today, the per capita income in China is about 5 times that of India. So therefore, one can look, what did China do? And can India replicate that? Or can India not replicate that? And just one aspect, because I was given only 5 minutes, I could speak for hours. One aspect to it is that China focused on exports. China manufactured for the world. And that is something that India hasn't done as yet. With that, China could become the richest country in the world when we look at their foreign currency reserves, for instance, and have the money for investment. And that is why then China invested in infrastructure like crazy. Look at the harbors, the 10 largest, out of the 10 largest harbors in the world, 8 are in China. Look at the railways. They copied the German technology, and now they have a railway network, which is insane when you look at the speed, at the capacity, etc. Yeah? And when you look at other things, they invested heavily in infrastructure. India didn't focus on exports, at least not when it comes to physical products. India focused on exports of services, especially in IT. There they are world champion. And incidentally, India focused on exports of its people. Because when you look at it, the Indian diaspora is the biggest diaspora in the world. Indian every year transfer a record sum lately of 120 billion US dollars back to India. So basically, with the Indian diaspora, India exported talent in a major way and helped develop America, UK, even in Germany. We would love to have the Indian diaspora because we have a problem. In Germany, we are an old society and we don't have the people to do the work. That's why the Chancellor, when he was here, he focused on qualified migration. And that is something where, again, India and Germany can work together very, very well. I leave it with that because I was only given 5 minutes. Maybe later in the discussion, I can come back. Thank you very much.
Very interesting points, Mr. Steinrucker. Our sincere thanks to you for this insightful keynote address. I would now like to introduce our moderator of the day, Ms. Soumya Chaturvedi. Soumya is an international research relations scholar and is currently working with India Foundation as a senior research fellow. She has worked as a consultant at the G20 Secretariat, Ministry of External Affairs, and with various departments of Government of India. Over to you, Soumya. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Himanshu. A very good afternoon to everyone. Before we commence, I would like to thank FNF South Asia for giving me this opportunity. Now, we've gathered here to discuss a very important subject, and we have a panel of 3 very esteemed speakers here who will bring out various facets associated with the topic, India's demographic milestone, opportunities, and the prospects and the obstacles. I'll quickly introduce our speakers, and then we can move on to discussing the topic in length. Our first speaker is Mr. Gurcharan Das, an author and former CEO of Procter & Gamble India. He's the author of a much acclaimed trilogy based on the classical Indian ideal of life's goal. India Unbound was the first on Artha, material well-being. The Guardian called it a quiet earthquake and is available in 19 languages and is also filmed by the BBC. Apart from authoring multiple books such as The Difficulty of Being Good and India Grows at Night, he's a regular columnist at the Times of India and covers different areas such as economy, politics, education, policies, and society. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Our second speaker is Mr. Abdul Matlub Ahmed. He's the president of the India-Bangladesh Chambers of Commerce and Industry. He's the chairman of Nitol Niloy Group and founder president of the India-Bangladesh Chambers of Commerce and Industries, Bangladesh Automobiles Assemblers and Manufacturers Association as well. He's the past president of the Federation of Bangladesh Chambers of Commerce and Industry, ex-president of Bangladesh Malaysia Chambers of Commerce and Industry, and he also holds a lot of other titles as well. Welcome you, sir. Our final speaker for the session is Ms. Katharina Wittke. She's the Director of South and Southeast Asia Pacific Division at the German Chambers of Commerce and Industry. Previously, she held the role of the Director for the Eastern Europe, Southeast Europe, and Central Asia Department. She joined the DIHK in May 2019 as the Project Manager for the Asia Pacific Committee of German Business. Katharina studied Eastern European Studies in her master's degree and also holds a business administration degree in her bachelor's. Welcome, Katharina.
Thank you. Welcome.
Before we start, I have a common question for our panel, and maybe then we can move on to the finer nuances. How do each of you look at India's demographic milestones and the opportunities that it presents to bolster India's economic prospects? And we can start with Mr. Gurcharan Das.
Well, there are two reactions that people have at this news that we have become the biggest populated economy in the world. The one reaction is, oh my God, so many people. The second reaction is, well, we have the youngest, one of the youngest populations in the world, and therefore a young population means the ability to work and to look after the very, very young and the very old. And so that's what leads to a demographic dividend. And there's really more and more in the 30, 40 years ago, people used to regard population in a negative way. But now they have seen, as the world ages, that a bigger population is not really so much a problem as much as an opportunity. And I'm sort of in between, in the sense that I think we do have the opportunity to create a demographic dividend, but it won't happen automatically. And for that, we will need to create an industrial revolution. We will need to fix our governance, and we will need to improve education, our education system. So let's take these quickly one by one. The first one is the fact that in the last 30 years since 1991, when the economy first started moving, India has grown at 7% average real growth, net of population growth during this period. And that is really quite remarkable for a democracy to have done. And the reality is that this growth has had a lot of benefits. It has lifted 400 million people out of poverty. A middle class has grown from about 10% to about 30%. So there are lots of statistics I could give, but it's been a good thing. But unfortunately, the problem is that it hasn't created the amount of jobs that 7% growth should have created. We seem to have jumped from a green revolution because we were a basket case in the 1960s. Some of you may remember. And now we are the fourth largest exporter of food, agricultural products around the world. So we jumped from a green revolution to an IT revolution. And as our distinguished keynote speaker said, that we are really now an IT power in the world. Well, this is all very good, and one should feel happy about it. But the big problem, the elephant in the room, is that 45% of India's population is still working on the farms in agriculture, and that's too many. And the value added, they deserve to have jobs with higher value added, higher productivities, and higher income level. And this worldwide has been a problem, but it has happened. The opportunity has been taken because of the Industrial Revolution. And so you can't skip from a green revolution, jump to an IT revolution. Services, yes, they'll do well. They've done well, but you still need to create that. And as our distinguished keynote speaker said, that we have not exported. We have not become the answer to solving this problem of excess people, surplus people on the farm, on the land, is to export labor-intensive manufactured goods. Manufactured goods still represent only 17% of our GDP. It should be double of that. And the fact is that although, yes, population has begun to decline, population was 2.2%. Population growth was 2.2%. Now it's come down to 1.5%. So it's been coming down, and some states have reached replacement level. 8 states in India are already at replacement level. But still, this is the challenge for the country. And we have to, the Atmanirbhar policy of the government has to be Atmanirbhar for the world, make in India for the world. We have to join up with the supply chains, the global supply chains. And for this, we still need to do reforms. Mr. Modi tried to do a land reform, labor reform, and the agricultural reform. And he did not succeed. The opposition became too great. His failure was not just his failure. It was a failure of every leader in India since 1991. We have not sold the reforms the way Deng and sold them in China, or Margaret Thatcher sold them in Britain. She used to say that I spend 20% of my time reforming, 80% of the time selling the reform. You have to change the mindset of the country in order to become a global exporter. You have to become competitive. So that is really the one issue. I would say certainly today, India is in a far better position to get the Industrial Revolution because our infrastructure is far better. India has doubled its road mileage from 2011 to 2021. It has quadrupled its port capacity, handling at the ports, quadrupled it, and it's got now one country economically. It's not 19 different states with barriers and octroys and trucks waiting at the barrier. With the GST, it's become one country. We've had a banking revolution. Only 42% of people had bank accounts 10, 12 years ago. Now 85% of people have bank accounts thanks to mobile banking. And we've, as we said, we've had a digital revolution. India is the largest user of data in the world as a result of that. So it's seeped right down. 800 million people now have smartphones. And then we talked about being leader in IT. So all these factors and the cumulative effect of reforms have made India today poised, I think, for an industrial revolution. But it won't happen without the reforms. So now I have two other points to make about governance, which is a very serious issue, and education. But I wanted to ask the moderator, do you want me to do it now? Because I don't want to take away time from other very, very distinguished people who are waiting to speak. So you tell me, I would take another certainly 5-7 minutes to cover the real needs. I wrote a book called India Grows at Night When the Government Sleeps. Now that's where the governance problem is. And so you tell me, my dear.
So we could ask the other speakers to sort of chip in their thoughts as well, and then I could come back to you again in another 10-15 minutes. So that'd be okay.
That's a good democratic solution.
Wonderful. Mr. Abdul, if you could have your thoughts on the question as well.
Yes, thank you very much, Ms. Soumya Chaturvedi. I'll be speaking on the neighboring countries' perception of India's demographic transition. See, Bangladesh is also a very highly populous country, and we too have a young population. But the advantage of Bangladesh is unlike India, where they have 27, 28 states, speaking different languages, having different types of food, having different cultural habits, even holidays are different. Bangladesh is one unit. And Bangladesh, as rightly said, like India, they're very entrepreneurship. And if you look at Bangladesh, that whatever happens, we try to take up the challenge. So here, what I can see, that India with an average of 29 years of age, 1.4 billion people, we are all aware of it. But what do you do with this asset? Now, what I can see, referring Bangladesh, this asset could be like a fire. You can cook or you can burn yourself. Now, as Gurucharanji directly said, and is rightly said that these demographic asset has to be utilized somehow. So how do we use it? If you look at Bangladesh and India now, we have the ratio of population. If you look at Bangladesh from 15 years to 54 years, both Bangladesh has got around 59.07%. India has also got similar population. If you look at the literacy, Bangladesh is around 74%. India is also around 74%. If you look at smartphone utilization, look at the digital penetration, you will find quite common. So while we have similarity, the question here is India's position good for Bangladesh, bad for Bangladesh, or what is it for Bangladesh? Because we are the closest neighbor. All around us, three sides is India. And one side is Bay of Bengal with a small bit of Myanmar. So India and Bangladesh is very closely knit so far as the economy is concerned. And Bangladesh and Northeast India is more closely knit than the rest of the India. So what I can tell you that there are advantages which Bangladesh can use. India is far ahead in education. Bangladesh has just started. Look at utilization of the young people. I was just, as I told you, in India the last week, and I had visited one skill development center in Kolkata called JIS. And I was so surprised to see that the government is funding skill development for the young boys and girls. And I went into one skill development center where I found over 300 to 400 boys and girls being trained in so many skills of life, including a hotel boy to a reception to cooking. So what I could see that India has taken a decision to use those young hands and make them from a liability to an asset. And this is what Bangladesh can learn from India. And other countries, neighbors should also try to take India's help on that. Even if you say the universities, India has got huge amount of universities where many Bangladeshi people go and stay and learn the technology from India. So if you look at some of the challenges, what we are facing now. One of them is good for us, but some people say these are challenge. Like a huge amount of Indian technical experts are working in Bangladesh. In fact, they are the largest foreign people working in Bangladesh in many of our industries. Of course, it is for our industries, but we have 200,000 young boys and girls educated and coming out, but no jobs every year. And this is one of our problems that we can get help of India. The other thing is the AI and the robotic technologies coming in. Like if you look at our ladies, hundreds of thousands of lady workers are in the garments industries. And today, we are exporters of ready-made garments to the world. We are number 2, ahead of India, much ahead of India. So how does it happen? Because the skill for the garmenting was passed on to the young girls. And they are 90-95% of the workers in garment industries. But now with the AI and robotics coming in, many robotics are coming into the garments industries. And these ladies are losing, some of the jobs. So we are now thinking what to do. Can we move into robotics? Can we train our people to skills and new skills of digital? Can this be done? So again, India comes in and India can perhaps help us. If they can send a rocket to the moon, they can also help us in digitalization. And what I would like to say that there is a lot of reason for financial inclusion. And this is what Bangladesh has done through Grameen Bank and BRAC, where people who were unbankable were given money without collateral security. Again, if you want to use the demographic benefits in India, they have to follow the success story of Bangladesh, where Grameen Bank had successfully given microfinance and micromanagement of finance very, very successfully. And India should really collaborate with Bangladesh on that. The financial inclusion of young people, educated or uneducated, without collateral security is the key word. I would like to tell that again, Bangladesh has proven itself in the agriculture. Although Gurucharan ji had mentioned that he is unhappy about the 45% of people still in agriculture, but in Bangladesh, during COVID, it is agriculture which saved our nation. There was not a single person who went unfed during the COVID time because we had our agriculture open. Today, we are the 4th largest producer of fish. Even in the rice, we are almost self-sufficient. So what I'm trying to tell you, that the new technology in agriculture, with using drones and all the digital system, the agriculture output can really grow. And in Bangladesh, young people, boys and girls, are going into agriculture, poultry rearing, duck, etc., etc. So this become very interesting. And I sell small vehicles to them under credit, and they all repay me. So while I'm trying to tell you that if India and Bangladesh join hands together, definitely both the nations will win. Thank you.
Visual thoughts as well?
Yes, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about the German perspective and the European perspective. From a German perspective, India's demographic milestone is often viewed with a mix of different opportunities. To 3 location factors rated highest by German companies operating in India include the availability of labor and the relatively low labor cost, which is really good for us, for our companies. Germany sees India's demographic advantage as an attractive opportunity for economic cooperation and also for investment. And as it was already mentioned, India's IT sector has also been growing very rapidly. It's called IT powerhouse. So India, this fact making it an attractive destination for tech companies with a growing number of startups and research institutions. So collaboration between our 2 countries is possible and would be beneficial for both sides if we are coming together and working on this issue. Also, it was mentioned already before that we do face all society here in Germany. So it's the other way around in comparison to Bangladesh and India. We do have, we need young people, well-educated people to come to Germany and to work in our fields and to support our economy. So yeah, we have the problem that we do have jobs, but we don't have people.
Thank you for that very interesting remark, ma'am. We often see that nations that don't optimize on the demography face issues such as economic stagnation and social unrest, and this is often referred to as the demographic dividend being turned into demographic disaster. And this is something I think all the three speakers have, in one way or the other, addressed. I wanted to ask all the three speakers, what are the challenges that Indian policymakers can face while planning for the world's most populous country? And I think Mr. Gurchand Das can also bring in the idea of governance reforms here. So, sir, we can start with your thoughts.
Yes. Actually, economic reforms are easier than governance reforms. And Margaret Thatcher actually told the British people, gave them a lesson, and you need a very you need a tough leader to do it, but also a more secure leader. Anyway, the key governance, the four pillars of governance are the judiciary, the police, the bureaucracy, and parliament. And I feel in India, really, we need reforms of all four. And these are really the problems. I mean, judiciary, the reality is it should not take 10 to 15 years to get justice in the courts. It's a shame that 5 million people are still awaiting trial, and our jails are full of under trial people. And that is very, 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 very wrong. And the reason, and this affects the whole country and the demographic dividend that we seek, because crooks get away when you can wait for justice for that long. The second issue in governance is the police. The police in India should be a lot more free. The police is a handmaiden of the ruling party, the chief minister, and it should not be that way. It should be a lot more independent, and there should be a sense of, for the common person. I'm a privileged person in India, but even I feel afraid going near a police station, and that shouldn't be the case. So that's the police. Now let's take a look at the bureaucracy. The bureaucracy, there are very fine officials in bureaucracy, but the incentive system is all wrong. In other words, a person who works 14 hours a day very effectively, that person gets promoted on the same day as someone who works only 2 hours a day and does nothing. And he gets exactly the same compensation and so on. So there's something wrong in a system of that kind. And finally, Parliament, 1/4 to 1/3 of the members of Parliament have a criminal record. And they often go into Parliament because they want to delay justice. They feel they can pull strings as member of Parliament. So these are the key, in the four pillars, these are the few governance. And it's a problem because politicians don't want to do those reforms. And it'll be difficult. But Mr. Modi wants us to be a developed country by 2047. But that ain't going to happen with this kind of governance. And let me just quickly add the point about education. I think there have been great advances that India has made in education, and certainly we produce the largest number of engineers now in the world. But the average person the average person who goes to school suffers from the fact that in a government school, 1 out of 4 school teachers is absent, and 1 out of 2 is not found, is present but not teaching. So what do poor parents do? They pull their children out of a government school and send them to a private school. And private schools, more than 50% of the private schools have fees less than 500 rupees a month. That's 5-6 euros a month. And these are not elite schools. They are schools for the poor. And so the reality is that they don't, in those schools, they don't get as good an education as they should. Teachers come, there are computers, etc. But the fact is that those schools are not run by education professionals. People are young, idealistic people. And why? Because we still have license Raj existing in education. You need licenses for which you have to pay bribes, and young, idealistic people don't want to do that. And so that is the key. The problem of our education system is governance. It's not. We have a very fine new education policy that came out a few years ago, which is trying to make Indian children go back to the way we were questioning people when we wrote the Upanishads 2,000 years ago. But then the rote system of education took over. Now, the education policy is against this rote system, and that's very good. But we have to solve the problem of governance. And once that is solved, I think only about 20% of people get a good education today. And you can see those 20% people go abroad and they do so well. And they need to do well in India as well.
Can't hear you.
Am I audible now, sir?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Could we have your thoughts as well on what do you think will be the fundamental challenges that the Indian policymakers can face?
Of course, the first and foremost is the policymakers, most of whom are maybe 50 plus, needs to have a change in mindset. Gone are those days when you hide the file and then claim some money to get the file passed. Those days are gone nowadays. They should now change their mindset, go digitally. And in Bangladesh, we have even gone as far as utilization of all our land records, because the maximum number of cases are on the land basis. So those things are getting obsolete now. What I would totally agree with the panelists here, that the governance needs to change. It is true, not only in India, but Bangladesh, but many other countries like this. The reason being that we can't afford to lose that time. The things are moving so fast now that India is now landed on the moon. It shows that India also needs to change in Earth their position. So India is leading the way in this subcontinent. And I feel that although Guru Charanji has told about the court, police, and the bureaucracy, I think the solution here, as we are doing in Bangladesh, is digitalization. And we have an SOP with time frames. Today, we can know where my file is, what is the decision coming in. And during the COVID time, I found ministers signing digitally first time in their life. And the files, big files, were moving without even meeting each other. So the way to change the governance system and try to avoid corruption and all that is to make a digital system where the decision seeker and the decision maker don't meet. It's through digital, it happens. Like nowadays, when you pay, you don't even swipe your card. You just show your square and the payment is done. That is exactly the way the governance should be done. And I believe Guruchandji could write a book on that, how to avoid corruption in developing nations. And I believe digital, without the decision seeker and maker meeting each other physically, may be the solution. Thank you.
Well, sorry, I just wanted to, wanted to underline the point that the same point that I think the fact also is in India, we've had a digital revolution. And as a result of that, that's the biggest factor which has reduced corruption in India as well. So he's absolutely right.
Right, sir. Ms. Katrina, if we could also have a German perspective on this.
Sure. According to Germany, some challenges Indian policymakers might face are, first of all, job creation, I guess, because of the huge amount of people living there. Then a growing population requires robust healthcare infrastructure, so adequate access to healthcare services is urgently needed. The same is true for Germany. We don't have so many people, but we do have old peoples. So also here in Germany, we do face problems in healthcare infrastructure. Then another important in both countries, in India and also in Germany, could be inadequate housing. So we need flats, houses, accommodations for all the people who are looking for work in our cities. So an effective urban planning is needed to accommodate all the peoples leaving the village and to come to work to the cities. Besides that, adequate infrastructure, including transportation, energy, and communication networks, is crucial for economic growth. So, and an additional challenge which we face is a growing population puts pressure on natural resources and the environment. So, of course, a big topic about environmental sustainability, which we are facing all over the world, is also a problem for every country, and also in India and in Germany. So addressing these challenges requires a multi-phased approach that involves collaboration between government bodies, civil society, and private sector stakeholders too. So it's crucial for Indian and German policymakers to develop comprehensive strategies that take into account not only the quantitative aspects of population growth, but also the qualitative aspects that contribute to social and economic development.
Thank you, Katrina. Thank you. This actually brings me a question for Mr. Gurchan Das. So from your rich experience and understanding of India and its economy, what sectors or activities do you think India can focus on to make the most of its demographic dividend? If you could just list out a few areas you think we need to focus on.
Well, the fact is that I mentioned the key, the way Asian tigers became Asian tigers, right from Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, Hong Kong, and the latest being China, all did it through the export of labor-intensive manufacturers. And Bangladesh has done a very good job in garments, for example. And those are the sectors, I would say, labor-intensive sectors, and such as garments, toy making. And the government now has also realized they've got a PLI scheme, for example, for toys. I would say that we should, it's going to be tough because of robotics, the AI, and so on, the new technologies, very, very tough. But nevertheless, the international trade in goods, not goods, services, but just goods alone, is $27 trillion now. Now, that India's share of that is 2%. And if you could take that from 2% to 3%, we'd experience an industrial revolution. And that's really the challenge. So those and it would be the labor. So the various schemes that we have in the schemes such as the PLI, Production Linked Incentive. I would put an incentive on export also, and also give a bias for labor intensity. Now, we don't want to be uncompetitive, but nevertheless, very often, because I've run a business, that the choice between using a machine and a person is sometimes very close. And the bias should be right now to give our people a chance. And as I said, when I said agriculture has 45% of the people, well, you could, and we could still, the agricultural revolution, which we talked about, the second green revolution, through the reform of the farm laws, would come about, and India could be a powerhouse agricultural country, but we don't need so many people to do it. And so therefore, there'd be a chance for them as well. So that's what I would, I seem to be repeating myself, but that's what I believe in.
For Mr. Abdul. So female labor force participation is very critical to leveraging a country's demography. And we've seen that Bangladesh has done phenomenally well to improve the female workforce participation. So how do you see India can learn from Bangladesh in this regard?
Well, with the female and also some of the males who are unbankable, there are two areas here. One is, of course, utilization of the gender thing, that since around 50% or maybe more of our population is ladies, we have to use their hands, their capacities. We have seen that when you empower them, they are much better than us. I mean, us means the men. I have seen even in the small businesses, they do much better. Even in India, I can find in many shops and many of these entrepreneurs are ladies who are doing very well. So how do you do that? I mean, they just can't come out. They don't have any assets. The husbands, most of the time, don't want them to give their assets as collateral. So the way that Bangladesh did was giving collateral-free small loans to the women. My wife, incidentally, is the president of Women Chamber founder, Selima Ahmed. She is the MP now, member of parliament. And she goes all over the world. She just came from Philippines on trying to develop the women entrepreneurship in the system. So what we have seen that when you loan money to a lady entrepreneur, the chance of getting back that money is very big. So you don't want to only train as workers, you train as entrepreneurs. That's MSME and SMEs. Only then they become part of the economy. Now Selima is doing, developing from there to larger investments. That's what she's doing now. And you'll be surprised to know there are many big industrialists in the country now running the show herself. So that's one area. The other area is, the education system must be such that from class 8, people must start at least one technical subject should be there. Because in Bangladesh, it was earlier that if you're a technical graduate, no girls would marry you. They want civil servants, they want doctors, they want this, but they don't want a technical guy. But today's world, it is technology and technology and technology. So what I'm proposed to our government was from class 8, one topic. And when you're class 11, 70% of the boys and girls must go to technical schools. I mean, the schools should be now restructured, where we can train these hands into some areas. And 30% will go into higher studies, become doctors, teachers, and bankers, etc. So I have two only areas that the education system, as Guru Charanji also, I think, mentioned, that the education system needs to be changed. We are already doing it in Bangladesh. Technical education is becoming the mainstay of the education. And the other thing is finance to the unbankables, whether it's ladies or young boys and girls. Give them finance without collateral security. That's also one of my propositions, the B20 in Delhi.
This brings me to Ms. Katerina. A growing economy with a young and skilled population presents an attractive proposition for companies looking to expand their markets. And it's, of course, a general proposition. Do you think the demographic milestone that India has achieved presents such an opportunity for the German or the European companies as well?
Definitely. Yes, a young and skilled population means, first of all, a large consumer base that offers potential for companies to enter new markets and to increase their customer reach. And India has a big pool of skilled labor, including professionals in fields such as IT, engineering, healthcare, and many more. So this also can be another advantage for European and German companies, which are looking for skilled workers and talents in these fields. So besides that, a growing middle class in India means also a rising demand for consumer goods, for technology, infrastructure, services. German and other European companies consider India as a potential lucrative market to expand their operation and also to export products. Yeah, as everybody knows, Germany is an export-orientated country. So yeah, India offers a lot of possibilities. And however, successful market entry and expansion require an understanding of the local market, of consumer behavior, regulatory landscape, and adapting business strategies accordingly. And this is where our networks of German Chambers of Commerce abroad, AHKs, come into play. We have 150 offices located in 93 countries, and they do support German and local companies to do business with each other. So in India, we do have the Indo-German Chamber of Commerce, which is headquartered in Mumbai and has 6 branch offices in India and also in Germany. So we have already over 4,000 members. And the Indian-German Chamber is the largest chamber within our network and also the largest bilateral chamber of commerce and industry. And one of many services which our chamber offers is to help young Indian people who want to be employed in Germany. So we do have programs we are trying to support Indian people to come to Germany and to support our businesses here. And yeah, we provide guidance and support throughout the entire talent acquisition and relocation process, including assistance with visa applications. So it could be a good asset that in India, there are so many people who can come to Germany and work here and get also education here. And also, besides that, our companies who are already active in India, they are also training people, Indian people, to work in the companies over there. So I think, yeah, there are a lot of positive perspectives.
Gurchan Das, I wanted to come to you. You spoke about reforms of different kinds, which are very necessary. And you also wrote a very interesting piece on reforms in the market to better the Indian economy. It was called Market Ki Baat, which is a very interesting article, sir. If you had to prioritize, say, 5 reforms or 3 reforms, which are utmost necessary for India to capitalize on its demographic dividend, what would those be?
Well, I would say, basically, I would say that the 3 reforms that the Modi government tried to do, they should be done. In other words, the opposition really hijacked those reforms. And that's partly the downside of a democracy. But also, it shows that we have not done the job. As Mr. Abdul was saying, you need a change in mindset. And in India, people still believe that the reforms make the rich richer and the poor poorer. Now, that's not true. We know that how the market can lift the whole country and so on. So, well, all I'm trying to say is that India has operated only on 2 engines rather than 3. The engine, the IT revolution, the green revolution, agriculture revolution. Now, the fact is, with just these 2, it has achieved a lot. It has a 7% real growth for 30 years is not as, it doesn't happen very often. And all I feel is that India has a hugely positive future if it can now get its, and to speak specifically to what Katarina was just saying, that India's success so far has been that producing so many technical people. We produce more engineers in the world than any country. And Germany's success is partly the engineering companies, the smaller and medium-sized engineering companies. So there's a huge sort of synergy here that we can get. Similarly, the lesson that Mr. Abdul talked about, the fact that women, I mean, that's like our weak spot. The labor participation by women in India is really, I mean, a source of national shame. And the reality is that India is a country of entrepreneurs. And so there should be, well, microfinance did it in the case of Bangladesh, but we've tried to follow the model, the Grameen model, etc. But there should be a way to get women much more involved and so on. But all I would say is, look, the future, I may sound negative, because I point out to all the problems. But the big picture, Somaya, is that, look, if we could reach 7% growth with just 2 engines, imagine if the third engineer got fired, third engine, making use of that technical talent in manufacturing. Just think what it could do. And I think we're at that takeoff stage where I think it will happen. And if we get to that 8-9% growth rate, even not for 30 years, but maybe for a period of time, we've done in the periods of 8-9% growth earlier, what we could have is total transformation of the country, and really, and it's a very real possibility that it will happen.
I think your point on the third engine, it's actually something that probably you should also write on more about. It's actually a very, very relevant point. Mr. Abdul, I also had a question for you. So over the years, we've seen that the India-Bangladesh economic partnership has grown significantly, and you've also touched upon it in your initial remarks. But do you think with the Indian demographic transition that's happening, it will create more chances of competition between the two countries, or will there be more avenues for collaboration? You did highlight a few on collaboration, but I'd be interested to know if you think that the two countries can also compete in a few sectors.
Well, if you ask me, I'm a business guy, an industrialist guy. Competition is everywhere, even within the family. If one brother gets to a good position, other brother wants to also cross him somehow. Even father and son wants to cross his father's position. Of course, we have competition amongst each other, but it is the unity in diversity that is in question. You see, we have diverse requirements, but the thing is, everybody wants to shape the world up. So first what we do, we try to shape the society up. So in Bangladesh and India, I found a lot of areas where we can cooperate for mutual benefit, especially in the digital area. India has got a big advantage in digital and the technology. Even in robotics and other places, now India is quite good. I tried to do my electric cars in USA. And when I went to Detroit and discussion for even a small thing, they wanted millions of dollars for technology. Look at India, they don't do that. So they try to cooperate with you and try to expand their market into Bangladesh. Because I am partners for Tata Motors for 35 years, we know the growth of what they are doing. So what I'm trying to tell here is, if you really want to use the Indian democratic advantage, 3 things has to be done immediately. First and foremost, the bureaucracy, I still find files in some of the bureaucrats' desks. All paper files has to be thrown out. Go 100% digital with SOPs for file clearances. That's the first thing that should be done. The second thing that India should do, we are also following it up in Bangladesh, throw away the old British education system. My father, who was a justice of the High Court, his ambition when he was young was a railway engine driver. That was the ambition that they had at that time. So British education system only created clerks, not entrepreneurs. So we now need to change that and go into technical and skill development system-based education. Of course, we'll have the regular education, but that will be much smaller. And the last thing, I don't know whether Gurucharanji will agree with me or not, stress more on agriculture, digital agriculture, use drones, use the most modern theory. Israel has got a lot of concepts on agriculture. Use them. Double, triple, 4 times agriculture production can happen. And then once we are self-sufficient in food, the rest is very easy. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Maybe if time permits, we could request Guruchan sir to also reflect on the agriculture versus the manufacturing sector debate. But in the meantime, Ms. Katrina had one question for you as well. We've seen that geopolitical considerations and the experience with the pandemic taught the world that we need to diversify our supply chains. Given the opportunity that India's demography will now create, do European stakeholders consider India as a viable partner or an alternative to their existing supply chain models?
Mm-hmm. Well, India's potential as a partner for diversifying supply chains is indeed being considered by many European and also German stakeholders. Geopolitical considerations and COVID-19 highlighted the vulnerabilities of relying heavily on just one single market for critical resources, especially. So many countries and businesses in Europe have to explore ways to diversify their supply chains to enhance resilience. So India's large and diverse population, along with its growing economy and manufacturing capabilities, making it an attractive candidate for such diversification efforts. As mentioned before, India represents a significant consumer market, and European business could benefit from increased access to Indian consumers. However, it is important to note that while India presents significant opportunities, there are also some challenges and considerations that stakeholders need to take into account, such as, we already mentioned it, infrastructure and logistics that may need further development to support efficient supply chains. Regulatory environment is also very crucial, especially for foreign business. So we face complex labor laws and bureaucratic procedures in India. And the protection of intellectual property rights is also very important for foreign businesses doing business in India. So it is therefore all the more important to conclude an ambitious free trade agreement between the EU and India that eliminates tariffs, opens up the procurement market and trade in services, protects intellectual property, and provides for unbureaucratic customs and rules of origin. So we are looking forward to conclude such an FTA between Europe and India. So I think that could help to both our business communities.
Thank you for that. To all our panelists, we also have some questions that are being posed by the participants for the seminar. These are on Facebook and other platforms. So I'll read those out as well. Some of these questions are for the panelists and some of them are individually directed, and I'll keep informing accordingly. We have a question from Mr. Walter Salch. This is for Mr. Gurcharan Das. While I agree to an extent that labor-intensive tasks can help foster another agricultural or industrial revolutions in the country, how does this help the country innovate and be competitive? The Asian Tiger strategy cannot seem to be re-evaluated in today's world. So your thoughts?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. And yes, the challenge of the new technologies is there around the world. It's not just here, but every job is at risk in the future. But, you know, still, I think, as I mentioned to you, just the global trade in goods, people still will need to wear clothes, people will still need to play with toys, and those things are not going to disappear. And as I said, that frankly, that trade is 27 billion and trillion, sorry. And yes, a lot of those things will be made through much more through technology. Nevertheless, there's still a lot of room. And what I find exciting is that India is going through a technological revolution itself right now. That the IT people themselves are now at the forefront. And this will create a whole lot of jobs that we can't even imagine in the future. And so it's not just dependence on manufacturing. Sure, I think we have already an advantage, a first mover advantage in IT and services. That will continue. And to answer my friend, Mr. Ahmad over there, Abdul Ahmad, that really agriculture, yes, India is already, by the way, self-sufficient in agriculture. It also fed 800 million meals were given out every day, free of cost in the country. Now that is a tribute to that self-sufficiency. Now we need to go beyond self-sufficiency to becoming a major exporter. And we are already the fourth largest in the world, but we can become the biggest. And it can be through not only technology, but these agricultural reforms which have to be done. So that's really my long answer to your short question.
Is to all the panelists, what is your opinion on exchange programs as a way to tap the dividend, demographic dividend? And maybe we could start with Ms. Katrina and go in the reverse cycle.
Yeah, exchange programs are a very important tool. I mean, I already mentioned that we do establish some exchange programs. For example, it's called Hand in Hand for International Talents. Right now, it's still difficult to implement them because we need visa, and the process to get a visa, it takes a long time. It's very complicated. So, it could be a very, very important tool, exchange programs, especially it's important if they come to work here, but also they have to get the possibility to come back to be skilled over there or the other way around. So I think for a globalized world, it's very important to have such exchange programs and bring the exchange of people forward.
Mr. Abdul, could we have your thoughts as well?
Yeah, of course. First of all, any exchange means that I'm ready to share my technology and knowledge with you. First and foremost, the countries and the companies must be ready to share. So that's the first thing. So if you are ready to share, as Katrina just pointed out that there are certain times visa restrictions in other places, but we have the digital thing now. During the COVID time, we did our entire business on Zoom and other digital methods. So what I'm trying to suggest here, yes, the exchange program is useful for everybody, especially countries like India, Bangladesh, and other countries like our condition. And we should use the Zoom method as much as possible. And then perhaps, suppose a German company has a branch in Singapore, Bangkok, Vietnam. So we could do the final exchange there to see how the machines work, how the technology works. It does not need that we all have to go to USA or Germany to really see how the machine works. So there are ways and means. COVID has taught us how to have alternatives. So we have now, as a company chairman, we always look for alternatives and solutions. And I believe that exchange is the way out for fast transition of technology between the countries and the people.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Gurcharan Das, could we also have your thoughts on exchange programs?
Well, excellent. I mean, who could be against something so good? And really, this reality of visas, I know it's really an obstacle for a lot of people today. And hopefully we'll go back to a world which will be less afraid of foreigners. And we'll go back to a world, I think we're going through a bad period globally. And all the gains that we've made as the world in the last 75 years, these gains will come back. We will, that we won't have this nationalistic sentiment prevailing in the world. It's I thought we had actually gotten over it, but apparently we haven't.
Right, so.
May I say one thought about what Abdul Ahmad said before? I think also initially in the beginning, if you don't know a culture, it could help such exchange programs to go there and not do everything digital in a digital way, just to get to know each other better. And then I think it's the best way to avoid cliches, to avoid that we don't like each other. So we have to get to know each other. We have to go there, see it, experience it with your own eyes. And I think then we can do everything good for people, but also for companies. I think, exchange programs are needed. And
Thank you for that. Mr. Abdul, I suppose this question is for you. Could you elaborate on the role of regional economic integration in India's path towards achieving greater economic prosperity? How are initiatives like trade investments and agreements and investment partnerships and infrastructure connectivity influencing both intra-country and cross-border economic activities?
Yeah, India has been leading BIMSTEC, BBIN, and SAARC, and all these regional organizations in the hope of having better connectivity, better global value chain activities. It has worked, but what we have seen that some of these countries regionally, India is very big, like Nepal is very small, Bhutan is even smaller. So you really can't have similar advantages for each of the countries. But there are common areas like power generation in Bhutan, imported into India, Bangladesh. Nepal can also do the same thing. So, and value added, Bangladesh has got leather. India can use the leather and make shoes. So these are value chains that are being done now. But what I can tell you that without regional cooperation, which we are now working on very strongly, it's very difficult to develop regionally. Because if one country becomes richer and rich, super rich, the other countries are very poor, it's like having a 10-story building for yourself and a thatched house or a basti on the next door. It doesn't look nice. So what we are now aiming at is through connectivity, not only people to people, but also road, internet connectivity, power connectivity, so the regional we can take the advantage. Like you may have more production. Bhutan has got a lot of power production capacities. Bangladesh needs power. India needs power. So this way we do the exchanges. So I believe regional cooperation is the way out for the countries like Bangladesh, India.
Thank you, Mr. Abdul. We have a question for Mr. Gurcharan Das. Is there an impact of colonialism still today on India? And if yes, would India be even more developed if it hadn't been colonized?
Well, let's go the other way around to this question. I think the reality is today, a lot of young Indian minds are decolonized. We may speak English, but now we don't need to speak English in the Queen's English, the BBC English, or Oxford, Cambridge English. People are quite happy mixing Hindi, English, Bengali English, we call it English, Biglish, Tinglish. All these are ways to really, we are relaxed about it. We see English only as a really, not as a status symbol so much as a convenience in the global economy. So that's very good. And frankly, the institutions of Britain have come handy to us as Indians. And even though we are going through this phase of, after Shashi Tharoor's book, I mean, he's a friend of mine, but I think that that chip on the shoulder, colonialism, was the cause of all our problems. I mean, I think young people have gone over it. And it's just now the fun of the media is trying to build something about it. And I think it's all we've gone ahead of it. And so if you ask me, I wouldn't worry about the colonial. Sure, we are speaking English, and many more people in India and the rest of the subcontinent need to know English, but only as a convenience. And what we ought to be able to operate. The nice thing about India, people think it's a very big disadvantage having so many languages, 21 official languages, but I think it's a good thing. It's a good thing because linguistic nationalism is also bad. Imposing one language. I mean, Bangladesh was created on a language issue. I'm sure Mr. Abdul Ahmed will agree with me that it was the imposition of Urdu on the Bengalis, which caused such the breakup of Pakistan. So thank God we did many things wrong, but this we didn't do wrong. I'm an old style liberal, and as an old style liberal, leave it. Everybody, let there be sun for everybody. Don't try to impose things on people. That's what I believe. So that's my long answer to a short question.
Thank you, sir. We have one question for Ms. Katrina, and I think then we can also head towards our closing remarks. Katrina, with Europe's efforts to reduce risk in its trade ties with China, do you believe India possesses the potential to emerge as a viable and appealing alternative trade partner? I think we've covered this, but I think the question is specifically targeted if India can sort of replace China to some extent as a reliable partner.
No, I wouldn't call it that India can be India is an addition. It's China plus one. It's India plus one. That works, but it's not a totally alternative to China because India can't replace China. We do have an infrastructure over there. A lot of German companies are successful in China already since 30 years. So I wouldn't call it replacing, but it is an alternative, of course. It has potential. We have, besides population, we do see the growth. We do the improvement in making infrastructure better. And yeah, I mentioned the FTA before. If that comes, it also helps to make business with China, together with China. But yeah, it's not a replacement process, but it could be a really good partner for the future.
Right. Thank you so much. I have one last question for the panel, and you could also just quickly give in your concluding remarks with this. In what areas should India focus its efforts to enhance and fortify its economic integration? And we could start with Mr. Gurcharan Das.
Well, I think that economic integration has taken place with GST, that all the states now have barriers have been removed. And so in a sense, India is a bit like Europe in that way. All these states were like the countries of Europe. And we are now a lot more integrated. as a country, and we should not homogenize. We should respect the diversity of each country, but of each state. But at the same time, the barriers, the friction, and a lot of it is going away anyway. That's not really an issue if you from a business standpoint, I believe.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Abdul, if you could have your concluding remarks as well.
Well, economic integration in India, when we look from outside, I find when I go to X state, it is opposition state. The other state is pro-government. So I find a lot of, different political parties in different states. And within that state, there are divisions. So my view is, if you really want economic integration, get political integration first. Have faith in each other, trust each other, and build your nation. Then only you will find smiles on the face of the people of India.
Thank you, sir. Katrina, if you could have your last remarks as well.
Yeah, I think economic integration, it is important, but we know is in Europe, it is also very, very difficult to get because we are different. We should be also different, but we should try to find solutions to work together anyway. So the same goes for India, and the same appeals for the whole world.
Right. Thank you for that. Thank you for all the wonderful insights. I'm sure everyone participating in this seminar and watching it from different platforms are left with some interesting food for thought on the topic. I will now request Frank Hoffman, the Regional Project Manager for the Frederick Naumann Foundation for Freedom in South Asia, to please take over the proceedings.
Thank you, Soumya, and thank you to all our panelists, distinguished experts. This event yielded a little bit what I hoped it would yield. Myself, I have spent about 15 years in India now, and I was always astonished to see a certain pessimism about India's population. Many Indians seemed that there are in India, and this is slowly giving way to optimism when it comes to the demographic development. This found its reflection in this event, though I have to say we of course also heard quite a few points on challenges that India will or might face on that way. As liberals, we strongly believe in this population optimism. I mean, the ultimate resource which sits here between our ears will shape our future, and India certainly has a lot of it. And I liked also what Gurcharan Das said now in the question and answer session. I mean, a strength of India is certainly its diversity. And with a growing population, that diversity is only really growing. We actively shape the future. I mean, it's not something God-given. And of course, quite a few things have to fall into place and have to happen for India to reap that demographic dividend. You touched upon all these areas. You talked about education, the labor market, healthcare, gender issues, also an area where quite a bit of work remains to be done. As the Friedrich Naumann Foundation, we do contribute through various initiatives and events to this discourse and to this debate. And now comes a little advertisement blog. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the work that we do in this regard. We, for example, have a series on the topic of education, one topic that's very important if India was to reap its demographic dividend. And our next event is going to take place on 30th October. We will talk about multilingualism in education. And every 2 years in Germany, India in all its diversity is being celebrated at the India Week in Hamburg. And it happens this year in November, and together with the Consulate General of India, we are planning an event on exchange of skilled labor between India and Europe. So do stay tuned and keep following us. Write to us if these topics interest you. And with that, I'd really like to thank, and I have to see that I get that right, of course, our very distinguished member of parliament, Dr. Hoffmann. I'd like to thank our keynote speaker, Bernhard Steinrücker. I'd like, of course, to thank all our panelists and experts, Ms. Katharina Wittke, Gurcharan Das, and Abdullah Ahmad, and of course, our moderator, Soumya Chaturvedi. And there are a few people behind the stage, which you from your screens can't see, but without them, this event wouldn't be possible. So I would, of course, like to thank our colleagues in the office in North Rhine-Westphalia in Germany, as well as the office here in Delhi. And I'm sure I will miss some names, but that is largely Mr. Martin Fischer, my dear colleague here, Manjari Mishra, as well as Himanshu Chavla. And of course, there is a technical setup that is required to run such events. And this setup is run by Universum, our IT service provider in Germany. And here, Mr. Nils Budrich supported us. So thank you very much. Thank you to you in the audience. Stay tuned, follow us, and we look forward to seeing you again at one of our next events. The very next event being actually on 15th September, an event on the Tibetan administration in India at the occasion of the Tibet Day. So thank you very much and have a good, afternoon in Germany and a good evening in